KYOTO video!
Ooh, is it that time of year once again? I believe it is. Welcome, my children of the night, to another exciting, spectacular month of KYOTO video. Anyways, October is a month where we give ourselves the collective creeps. The most effective way we can do this is by scary movies. And you know what those movies have? Gore. Gross, disgusting gore. Sure, we can enjoy the horror movies that crawl into our skulls with their psychological and existential scares, but we cannot forget that some of the most thrilling scares in film history have come to us through the goop. The corn syrup red buckets of blood, the musty dusty cobwebs that cover the haunted mansion, the puppetry that can best be described as moist. All those standard special effects that make for excellent horror scares. The animated medium operates under similar rules. They also utilize the art form to elevate their scares, whether it be for giving us unsettling atmospheres or just bringing us the blood and guts. But with the persistence of clean CGI in the industry, along with the stubborn stigma that still clings to the art form like a ketchup stain, the opportunities for scary bloody animation is rare these days. But lucky for us, Japan has no such stigma, especially in its OVA days. If you ever want to see horror-style special effects be brought to life through the animated medium, anime from the 80s and 90s are always going to be your best bet. The surge of OVAs in films in that period showed us that being able to animate blood pouring and limbs flying was just as much of an art form as boarding a beautifully choreographed fight scene was. Well-boarded gore can always be the difference between a horrifying scene or a laughable scene. And sometimes, it can help uplift an otherwise unremarkable anime into something pretty good. Komada and Koshigaya. By day, they are professors of molecular biology, men of letters lecturing to halls of bored students, or in Koshigaya's case, dating them. But as night falls, the two men take on a new occupation. The molecular biologists become hunters, biohunters as it were, pursuing a mysterious virus that turns the infected into inhuman demons with insatiable appetites for human flesh. And with any luck, they will try to cure and put a stop to this hidden pandemic.
Hang in there, Mary. You have got to stay strong.
But there's a twist. Komada is one of the virus's numerous infectees, and while he does have enough control of the virus's transformation properties enough that it can be a superpower of sorts, it gets more and more difficult to turn back fully into a human each time, leaving Komada wondering how much of a human he still is at this point.
Fact is, it's very hard for me to remain scientific about this virus, and none of my colleagues would believe me, except one, my friend Komada. And that's because he's been infected by it.
1995's Biohunter came to us at a good time. Even in the mid-90s, when the anime world was increasingly tightening their belts and facing stiff competition from the realm of primetime and late-night anime, there were still quality OVAs to be had. OVAs that made their bones on giving the people what they want, and that was hardcore violence. In retrospect, people knock these types of OVAs for using their gory displays of brutality as a crutch, and not without due cause in some cases, even though well-animated gore is still animation done well, and we here at KYOTO Video think that's worth celebrating. Especially in the case of Biohunter, where the animation is most, if not all, it has going for it. What do I mean exactly? Well, let's get down with the sickness with Biohunter, shall we? The origins of Biohunter begin with the work of artist Fujihiko Hosono. Born on December 2nd, 1959 in the Ota ward of Tokyo, Hosono got his creative career started when he was hired to work for the legendary science fiction planning and production studio, Studio New, all while he was still in university. His first assignment? Being the illustrator for Haruka Takachiyo's manga adaptation of his Crusher Joe series of novels. While the manga was only made as a means to promote the book series, that being the reason why there was only one volume made, it was a success, and it led to not only the Crusher Joe series having a renaissance in the early 80s, but also kickstarted Hosono's career into overdrive. Throughout the 80s, he was behind popular shonen manga titles like Gugu Ganmo and Dokikiri Doctor. These were your typical weirdo comedy shonen titles that came out in the wake of Akira Toriyama's Dr. Slump, but they were still well-received titles and brought Hosono sustained success throughout the decade. When the 90s rolled around, Hosono felt the need to really stretch his creative muscles. To this end, he moved on to writing more mature stories for seinen magazines. He wanted to get away from doing oddball gag-focused manga and start transitioning to more serious narrative-based projects. And he really sank his teeth into this venture, pumping out story after story after story for seinen magazines, some of them long runners, while others one-shots. He didn't limit himself to a singular genre, nor did he make an attempt to lighten his workload either. He would often have multiple stories of his running alongside each other, which was only doable thanks to most of them being given irregular serialization. During this period of mania for Hosono, one of his stories he wrote was a one-shot called Biohunter. It was a short-lived series, lasting from 1989 to 1990 with only one volume released. Since only a few scans and no fans translation of it exists, I can only really judge it by Hosono's arts. Though he does opt for disarming stylized character designs, he still ends up drawing the body horror in a way that really pops off the page. And being that the early 90s was still a time when OVAs were still in demand, naturally, Biohunter soon found its way onto the adaptation shortlist. Thanks to his time at Studio New, Hosono had quite a few connections to the anime industry. He was the person who designed the Lovely Angel's sexy uniforms for the Dirty Pair TV anime, and by the 90s, he already had one of his seinen titles be adapted into an OVA. Getting Biohunter to the animated medium was a cinch at that point. And lucky for Hosono, the adaptation he got would be done by a serious studio with plenty of serious talent. I am, of course, talking about Madhouse and its co-founder, Yoshiaki Kawajiri. But let's slow the roll for a minute there. While Kawajiri did indeed work on Biohunter, it was only in the scripting and the animation department. Directing and storyboarding would instead be handled by Yuzo Sato. Sato had been bouncing around the industry since the early 80s as a key animator and animation director. Some of his most notable works prior to Biohunter was being animation director on a few episodes of Dirty Pair and Madhouse's adaptation of the popular Yawara, a Fashionable Judo Girl. Biohunter was Sato's debut as an actual director, and it would lead him to greater projects such as storyboarder on Monster and directing the anime adaptations of Nobuyuki Fukumoto's Akagi and Kaiji respectively. From a technical standpoint, a lot would suggest that the OVA of Biohunter is nothing that spectacular. There's nothing objectionable about the soundtrack by Masamichi Amano, except for maybe the heavy use of the Oboe MIDI preset that really brings out the 90s primetime soap opera in this anime. Toshihiko Seki and Kazuhiko Inouye pull pretty good performances as both Kamada and Koshigaya respectively.
それがデモンウイルスを撲滅するための唯一の手がかりだ。
だったら早いとこなんとかしてくれ。いつまでコントロールできるかわからん。俺が乗っ取られんうちにな。
And the English dub provided to us by Urban Vision is also not that bad either, although it is not without a few 90s anime dub quirks.
What if this thing just decides to eat me alive?
Hey, I'm sure you taste like crap.
But like the music, it's good but not spectacular. Any quality that this anime has is solely on the animation. I guess it's on me that I'm surprised that a Madhouse anime has good animation, but I really am impressed at just how they are treating this like it's still the excessive 80s. Even the best OVAs of the mid-90s look no different from their TV confederates. Madhouse did not get the memo and are making this OVA shine in cinematic, gory glory. The animation of creatures is deliciously horrific. The flesh squirms and morphs. The tentacles whip across the screen and wrap themselves around their unlucky victims. And Komada's demon form, on top of being this horrific amalgamation of vampire, goblin, and werewolf, is animated in such an excellently creepy way. His movement communicating that he is mostly a feral beast in this form, but one that has some modicum of thought. Behind those bloodshot eyes and lolling tongue is a brain that is thinking on its feet. Komada desperately clinging on to his own humanity is the factor that makes him a better fighter. Speaking of, the action in Biohunter is top-notch, animated and choreographed by mainstays like Shinya Takahashi and Kawajiri himself. Most of the action seen in this anime is very snappy, fast-paced, and always leaning into spraying the red stuff. I counted at least 4 holy shit that I belted out over the runtime. We also must give proper credit to Sato for this being his first directorial outing. He is conservative in a lot of his execution. Despite a lot of Kawajiri's trademarks like an urban setting and character designs by Hiroshi Hamasaki, who really did some transformative work here, it's probably the least stylish anime that operated in the Kawajiri mold. It's toned down Kawajiri, more standardized for mass appeal. But even then, Sato does have an eye for how to make scenes tense and spooky, having the camera take the viewpoint of the monster lurking in the shadows, using singular coloring to make the atmosphere of a scene feel oppressively dark, macabre close-ups of the physical effects of the demon virus, reveling in their inhumanity.
Komada!
With that in mind, he does make some questionable choices. There are scenes where Sato will use creative camera angles to cut around the carnage, leaving the horror to the viewer's imagination. But then he'll end up revealing everything at the end of the scene, which takes some of the wind out of the sails of those prior scenes. Also, since all the victims being brutalized by the main antagonist are women, this creates some interesting choices in boarding by Sato. Biohunter is a horny anime, and I am not opposed to this at all, but there are shots like this that make everything way too gratuitous. And by the way, your mother just walked in and saw everything. Those are all small complaints though. When the animation is this good throughout to the point that the obvious cost-saving measures are rare, I can't bring myself to knock its shortcomings. The story though, oh my friends, that's where the knocking begins.
I think it's not your usual weirdo pervert.
If you've been keeping up with this show for as long as I have been making it, you will know that Yoshiaki Kawajiri is a man of many talents. Director, animator, storyboarder, designer, and among those talents is screenwriter. Some of his best work was written solely by him. Ninja Scroll's screenplay was all him, as was his contributions to anthology works such as Neo Tokyo and The Cockpit. He's also had his fair share of whiffs, usually in the form of having to adapt someone else's work. And therein lies the trouble with Biohunter. As I said before, I cannot judge this anime as an adaptation because I only have a handful of raws to go off of. I can judge it as a story, and that story is well below average.
No, you don't know anything about that. Don't know anything about any murders committed by something not human.
Looking at the plot of Biohunter as a whole, it just feels like Kawajiri is on autopilot for most of the screenwriting process. It's like he's taking the plot of Hosono's original manga and trying to cram it into a nice Kawajiri-shaped hole for him to work on. It plays most of his hits, the freaky powers, the everyman protagonist in a nice suit, the competent female sidekick who eventually finds herself victimized by the villain, the tiny old man who knows more than everyone else, and, in a way, the femme fatale with the freakiest power. It's almost as if he's relying on these tropes to work because it becomes apparent early on that he and his team are struggling to get this over the 60-minute mark. The main plot involves Komada and Koshiyaga in search for someone with a demon virus that is going around and violently killing young women like a serial killer would. You would think this would be a perfect opportunity for the first half of this anime to be a detective story, gathering up clues to find the killer. But that doesn't really happen. Their only lead is a young woman named Sayaka who says that her grandfather is a famed fortune teller who knows who's behind all the killing. And that's what half this anime is, the search for an old geezer. A plot beat that's so stretched past its breaking point that our heroes even stop at a hot springs for a break in the middle of it.
To wash off all their troubles from his body, he uses the waterfalls.
The waterfalls?
Yes, the waterfalls are the only place that I can think he would be now.
The waterfalls. Which waterfalls? There are waterfalls everywhere.
They do bring it up with some action scenes. It turns out that whoever they need to find has enough resources behind them to stop our heroes' pursuit with their hired goons.
Hired goons?
That's what I said, hired goons. But it would probably be more compelling if the characters apart from Komata were more interesting than a pair of traffic cones. Sayaka's character never evolves beyond cute girl love interest, and Koshiyaga, while adding some levity with a devil-may-care attitude in contrast to Komata's seriousness, is nothing more than Dr. Jones with an active sex life.
Hey, I'm not like you. I don't get involved with my students.
Ah. I'm professional when I date my students.
Two are just bit players in Komata's story. Komata and the struggle with maintaining his humanity in the face of his greatest challenge is where all the drama coalesces around.
But am I Koshigaya? Because I'm not a human being.
Even then, that feels half-baked. The anime wrestles with padding its runtime, but it didn't need to. They could have added so much more to Komata's character to make his battle with the demon inside him much more fascinating. Give us hints to what his life was like before he got infected. Maybe add a personal reason for why he feels so driven to eliminate the demon virus beyond his duty as a scientist, a deceased spouse, or a lost friend, or something that could hint at any prior interior life. Or, failing that, give him a higher calling to why he must hold on to his humanity long enough until a cure is found. Pathos, dear boys, I need pathos! I guess the love interest would count, but if they had any chemistry, which they don't, the addition of my above suggestions would only make the tragedy and romance element all the sweeter. This is what I mean when I say that the anime's writing feels like it's on autopilot. It has no greater ambitions beyond going through the motions. Anyways, we find the old man, who then proceeds to sit our heroes as well as the audience down to explain the plot to us. I'm also pretty sure that this is the last we hear of the demon virus as it pertains to this plot. The important thing we learn is that the identity of the killer is that of the head of the Liberal Democratic Party, Japan's largest and most conservative political party. Kinda on the nose to portray right-wingers as inhuman monsters who see women as nothing more than consumable flesh. But as soon as that information is revealed, the killer's goons show back up, kidnap the old man as Sayaka, and leave Komata and Koshiyaga for dead. But thanks to an admittedly clever bit of body horror of using his disembodied hand as an improvised tracking device, Komata easily finds their hideouts. After some killer gore-tastic fight scenes and the bloodletting of characters who are no longer needed, we now get our final battle between Komata and the killer, who is now in his Greg Nightmare phase of the disease. They have a fight, Komata wins through recovering his humanity and having his disembodied hand ripped through Sayaka's body, which she suffers no damage from, and the anime just ends. Yeah, the anime ends with Komata turning back into a human and walking off into who knows where with cryptic statements about how he will never be fully human.
I'm not Komata.
No word about if that demon virus is ever cured. Komata is outta here, baby. Roll credits. But even with all the first draft storytelling laid out before us, Biohunter still comes off better than I thought it would be. And it's all thanks to it being a Madhouse production. If this was done by any other studio like Magic Bus or Ashi Pro, it would not be nearly as endearing. Even though talented folk like Kawajiri are sleepwalking through this anime, this being the final product is only more evidence of their skills. At its core, Biohunter is a middle-of-the-road horror anime. A B-movie built for popcorn nights and 3-star ratings at best. And it looks this good. If we can celebrate otherwise unremarkable horror movies who have great effects, then we can surely give the same treatment for similar anime. So if you need cheap animated thrills but do care if those thrills look good, then look no further than Biohunter. Just watch out for those tendrils first. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video or want to support this channel, please donate to my Patreon. Each dollar can give you early access to my videos as they come out, as well as keep the channel running a bit more smoothly. You can also subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications, or just like this video. Either way, you'll be helping me out. That's all for now. See you for the next round of tapes.
You go to hell. Here's your ticket.